Welcome to Undercurrents of Romance, the show that celebrates every subgenre of romantic fiction. In each episode, I peel back the layers of your favorite love stories and chat with the talented authors who bring them to life. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. Now, let's dive in with today's guest. Hello, romantics. I'm here with New York Times bestselling author Eloisa James to talk about her new Scottish historical romance, Hardly a Gentleman. Welcome to the show, Eloisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I couldn't help but notice that you dedicated this book to everyone who applauded your idea of a naked laird fly fishing. So I have to ask you, did this idea strike you while you were thigh deep in an icy Scottish loch somewhere?
No, no, I did not. My husband and I went over to England and Wales and Scotland, and the way you do, we went through way too many castles, actually. By about the sixth and seventh one, I was like, okay, seen this latrine, seen that latrine. But we came to a very small one that did have a lake, sort of a lake behind it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those places that feels as if it's lost in time because it hadn't been made into a museum. It was just kind of a wreck.
Uh,
I I had this, imagination of traveling through time. Like if I walked around this shabby castle, would I find like a Dudley 1800?
rat in the
Had my
corner, that
husband
kind of
behind me,
thing.
but whatever. It was just an idea. They come to you, right?
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was I went and told an audience about my idea, and they were all like shouting. So I was like, all right, I'll do it.
I think I've got something here. Well, it was a wonderful way. I do applaud you and thank you for Kalen. That he's such a great hero. It was such a fun way to get the story started, and you got a real sense of both of the characters right away, just from that one scene. So that was wonderful. Although it was very unique and refreshing that you took a little while before you brought them together. You know, they had their own thing that they were going through, one in England, one in Scotland. And I thought that was a very fun way of getting the story started. Did that just organically happen, or did you kind of think through that and try something different?
I mean, often when a story starts right together, you're leaning on a trope really heavily. So you can start immediately if you have Beauty and the Beast, boom. If you have enemies to lovers, boom, all you need is one fight. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted this book to be one of those escape things where, the castle's there full of books and the laird, and we all want to escape. So I
Yeah.
I wanted to set it up so that we want to go to Scotland with them, right? And
Yeah.
I wanted them to be friends. This is a
Yeah.
friends book. I mean, my daughter is probably my toughest critic. She's in her 20s. She can be very, Mom, that is so uncool kind of thing. But with this one, she said, it was the best compliment she's ever given me. She said, I didn't want to leave the castle. I didn't want to leave that banter. And that was what I was aiming at, that when they came together, um, he instantly wants to marry her. Of course, she doesn't want to marry him, but they're not enemies. They are,
Yeah.
they immediately start talking in a really fun, sort of sexy,
Yeah.
teasing type of way. And I wanted the whole book to be like that. So I had to set them up beforehand without using a trope, essentially.
Yeah. Well, it felt like you had a fun time
Yeah.
writing the book. And so that really came through in the writing and the banter and all of that. And yeah, there's so many moments that I could talk about. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there's so many moments I could talk about that just had me, I would just find myself smiling. I'd be reading along and also I'm like, I got this
Yay.
big grin on my face. And
Thank you.
it was such a joy to read this. So thank you so much. Before we get more into the story, would you mind getting us started, telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, about me. Sure.
Yep.
Well, so I've written a lot of romances, historical romances, like over 30. And I've been writing pretty much in the historical romance as long as anyone. Julie Quinn started before me, but we have been friends a long time. So
Yeah.
um, I I am a professor. I'm trying to remember about myself here. No, I'm a Shakespeare professor. And this year I'm on sabbatical, so I'm not actually teaching, which is
Oh,
lovely.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just finished 5 years chairing the English department at Fordham. So we get a year off
Okay.
after that,
Nice.
especially if you went through the pandemic. So
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I
so
didn't
most
even
of the
think about
time
that.
I teach historical plays, right? I teach people walking and talking in the past, written by Shakespeare, written by other people at the same time, which means that it really gives me a leg up when it comes to writing historical romances set in the past, because I think what I don't like to see in a romance too much is too much description. I like actual dialogue. I like people doing things. I like things to happen. And so I'm lucky in that I teach, pretty much the greatest person at doing that from the 1600s. And
Hmm.
so I bring that home. Another great part of that is that I'm constantly teaching people who are in their early 20s. And that means that over my long career, my first book came out in, 99, I think, 2000. Um, their opinions have changed about what should be happening with men and women. We can all think of that, with consent is a very obvious one. Me Too, all kinds of things. Pirates, not that cool anymore. A
Yeah.
lot of things have
Yeah.
changed, but I'm lucky because my students kind of keep me up on it. Like
Yeah.
20 years ago, they would say, I don't like Hamlet. He's a big complainer. Now they're like, I don't like Hamlet. He's a sexual predator. I'm like, okay, things are things shift, and luckily I have all these kids to shift with me. So,
Yeah.
or to
Yeah.
shift me would be more accurate.
Classroom of kids and your daughter. So,
And her. Oh, she's the
yeah.
worst though. Absolutely
Yeah.
like, Mom.
Keeping it real, keeping it real. Absolutely.
I like an alpha. She doesn't. So
Oh, I see. Yeah. She likes, what do they call that? Oh, shoot. Muffin. God.
I muffin, yeah. I just
Ah,
a
they
beta.
just
She's like, I
cinnamon,
like
cinnamon
cinnamon
bun,
roll.
cinnamon roll. That's what it is. Cinnamon roll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she likes a man who can make a casserole. I'm like, no. But
Yeah,
we come together.
yeah, yeah. Speaking of Julie Quinn, she gave you a wonderful quote on here. It says, "Nothing gets me to a bookstore faster than a new Eloisa James." That
Yeah,
was
lovely.
lovely. Very nice. Well, Hardly a Gentleman. It's book two in your new Accidental Bride series. Can you give us just a quick overview of the story and maybe how it ties into the series?
Sure. It's really a standalone novel because there is one character who shows up late in the novel from another one. But basically, my heroine, Clara, is a complete failure on the marriage market, which I always think is an interesting start. But for an original reason, which is that the regent, who was a
Yeah.
terrible sexual harasser, this is realistic, has gone after her from the moment that she first debuted. And his obvious attentions mean that no gentleman wants to court her because, he did single out his mistresses and then, went through
Yeah.
many of them. So something really horrible happens at a garden party and with the regent, and her mother is like washes her hands of the situation, says, goodbye. So she's headed up to Scotland to live with ancient, you know, aunts, great aunts who she doesn't even know. And she figures out that the coach next to hers is going to Scotland to be to a castle where there's supposed to be a housekeeper. And she's like, I'm going to do that. I do not want, she doesn't want to go with the great aunts. She doesn't want to
Yeah.
get married. She wants a castle and she wants it to be full of books. So she gets in that carriage and she goes. And when she gets there, she finds Kaylin in the stream. Now I have to ask you, wouldn't you fly fish naked in the stream if you had pleats on your kilt? I mean, of course he wants to go over the bush because he's a widower. His wife's been gone for quite a
Mhm.
while, and he doesn't want to deal with the pleats. Plus, he likes
Yeah.
fishing. So
Yeah.
he has a castle full of books and dirt, and neither one of them have any idea how to clean. And she's like, if I'm cleaning, you're cleaning. And he figures out right away that she's no housekeeper, but he wants to stay with her and stay next to her. So
Yeah.
the series is called Accidental Brides simply because in both books, the heroines sort of accidentally end up married about halfway through the
Yeah.
book. So
Yeah. And what ties, maybe you can share what ties the first two books together.
There's just a
The,
character in, well, you do meet Clara in the previous book. So, but she's the friend of the heroine in the previous book, and you
yeah.
know that she's making these little reticules, these little handbags that are shaped like animals with little animal
I want
whiskers.
one.
I know,
I
they're
want
great,
one
right?
so bad, yeah.
Yes. So in the previous book, she uses one of those reticules to slash it into the archbishop, because poke him at a moment which is needed for the book. And this
Yeah.
one, she slaps the regent in the stomach with her whiskers, and he's very so. But then later on, someone recognizes her. She's in the church, and someone from that first book comes in, the sister, and is like, "Whoa." It's a very small character in the first book, but she knows who Clara is. And she says, "You are no housekeeper. You are the Honorable Miss Clara Vetri. What are you doing?" And at that point, the hero's like, "She's marrying me right now." And she has to get married because it
Yeah.
would it would destroy her mother.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, thank you. That's a great setup. Very, very good teaser.
mhm.
And it is the reason for her escaping England or London is a very kind of difficult, as you said, the regent was pursuing her. You could have made it feel very dark and very
Yeah.
icky. And it was, I mean, it was, don't get me wrong, it was the way he was going after her. But even through that, the way that Clara was dealing with it and trying to work around him and avoid him and things like that, I thought that it kept the tone, the flavor that you were trying to
Yeah.
keep in the book. And so I appreciated that because you could have turned it into kind of a very dark moment for her. Um, but it had kind of that fun Regency kind of mishap kind of
Right.
tone to it, which was, I loved it. I loved that he got a good whack from her.
I
I
like
do.
that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Needed it. Maybe more than we.
Absolutely, he did.
I did I will say I happen to be someone who writes and rewrites and rewrites. So every
Okay.
page in here has been rewritten several hundred times probably. And I did write it darker several times, but it didn't
Okay.
fit with where the characters were. I never write a character who's going to need therapy. So
Yeah.
I don't write, child abuse. I don't write people who've
Yeah.
been abused. I don't. And if that was really dark, she would have been totally bruised by it. So
Oh
no,
yeah.
she's a plucky girl who gets into a carriage and is like, "Forget it, I'm going to Scotland with my books."
Created her
She
own
shows up at the door
destiny.
of the castle with a stack of books and no clothes. So
I
that's who
loved
she
it.
is.
I loved it. And her bodice, there's something that just keeps happening with her bodice. Yeah, no, it was great. It was great. Well, one of the things that I like to dive into on this show is finding the story's undercurrent with the author. It's that second beating heart of the story that tends to flow beneath the lover's journey, and it oftentimes will help propel the story forward. What undercurrent do you feel, and there might be more than one, what undercurrent do you feel is flowing beneath Clara and Kaylin's story?
Well, that's a really interesting question. No one has ever asked me that, so I have to think in it. But I mean, two things come to mind right away. One is stems out of that situation with the regent, right? I think lots of us have had a tough high school experience.
Mhm.
I certainly did. And mockery, especially from young men, from boys in that case, can stay with you for years. And
Mhm.
so shaping that scene, it's very cathartic. One of the things I say about romance is that people always think that the genre is just about, two people or more people or a monster or whatever getting together and having sort of a happy, respectful
Yeah.
relationship. But I think that's true, but I also think a huge part of it is comeuppance, you know, the feeling that there is a hidden architecture to life and that things will come around all right. And so
Yeah.
when this horrible thing happens to her, you know, she's like, fine, I won't get married. I don't need a man. I need books. So, she's like, fine. But there's something enormously satisfying about having this tremendously handsome, naked laird on top of her on the spot because
Mm.
all the other men were afraid of the regent down there in England. And being afraid of authority is just not an alpha trait.
Yeah.
Is this guy's like, do you want me to take a pistol and go down there and shoot? He doesn't know it's the regent. And she's like, you don't have to do that. But
Yeah.
point is that he's not afraid. He's the man she needed.
Hmm.
The come up is having him instantly become a protective alpha, right? Um, and then the second thing I have to say has got to do with that castle because Caerleven, if you, those of you who may have read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I stole that name, the Caerleven out of the castle in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Ah,
Kids end up rulers. That's not exactly the same, how to change things a bit, but basically that idea of another world. If you've read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you go through a wardrobe,
yeah.
you're in a
Yeah.
different world where it's just magical. So you have a castle that's floating in a sea of blue and purple flowers, right? I gave
Mhm.
it that little bit of magic without there being any magic. So when she walks through the forest to the Loke, it's a matter of two paragraphs. But I tried to channel that sense of magic.
Yeah. You gave
Yeah.
her bluebells instead.
Yeah, you asked for something I've never said that to anyone. So that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a wonderful time doing that. I loved those stories and I loved reading them aloud to my kids when they were small.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Well, you've, as you mentioned, you've been published for quite a while and have seen the ebbs and flows of historical romance, and we seem to be in a moment of ebbing.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit about that. And I know mass market is just the format itself. They're talking about doing away with mass
Gone,
market. Yeah.
gone. This is my last little book.
Is it? Is it? So is it going to be
Too bad.
trade?
Yes, it's going
Yeah.
to trade. Everything is going to trade, which I think is so sad because this book is
Yeah.
perfect for the bath. You know, the
Yeah.
paper is crap. Not very much either, but
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. We've
Yeah.
replaced ebooks, have replaced mass market.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're in an ebb for sure. But I have to tell you, there've been so many times in my career when people have said I mean, historical romance is now dead,
Yeah.
that I just keep thinking that um, people do read for genres, but in my
Hmm.
experience, they also just read for a good story. Like I'll read it.
Hmm.
If somebody tells me this, the only things I don't read really violent stories. So some of the darker mafia stories are not for me. But in the general train of things, I'll read sci-fi. I don't care if it's on a planet. I actually don't care if, you know, if your boyfriend is a bug, as long as you can make him into a sexy one, you know, well written, I will go after. So my hope is that even in the midst of an ebb and hopefully not a death, people will come and find Hardly a Gentleman anyway.
Yeah.
And the Last Lady Bee, which is the next book that comes. What else could I do? I love writing
Yeah.
this book. I had so much fun, and I think that gets onto the page. Um, one of the things that always strikes me as being so odd is that there's always more to learn about writing. I mean, how can there be more to learn about writing romance when I've been doing it so long? And I
Yeah.
got starred reviews back then, and I'm getting, you know, this one's got all starred reviews now. But
Yeah. Congrats.
all the same, I learn so much every book. And I learned a lot about writing, more about writing, humor in particular for this book. So I'm hoping that, you know, that my love of the genre and my love of these characters will give it an audience somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any advice for maybe newer authors, historical romance authors, or some who might be have been at it for a few years, how they, I guess, kind of work through this current ebb that we're going through, you know, how they just they keep at it, you know? Do you have any kind of advice
Yeah.
on how to do that?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have good advice, but every time this has happened, I have thought really carefully about the market, about what, and not the market the way people say, like they're saying
Hmm.
on Twitter or they're saying whatever. I'm not even on X, but um, the market that I like to read. Because if you're not reading romance, you know, you're not going to be writing it. I can't read historical because my voice is leaky and I'll start, you know, like sort of borrowing people's clever ideas,
Yeah.
or else I get jealous and I wish I just not a good experience. But I read everything else pretty much. And I look to see what I'm enjoying. What am I enjoying? And the other thing I do is I look on we all watch so much more television than we used to, right? What's
Mhm.
really good? What's written really well? What's really surviving? And then I think about, what do I want my next series to be? What do I want my next book to be? How do I want it to be different? How can I maybe grab some readers? So I'll tell you that my next book is not going to be part of this series. It's called The Last Lady Bee, and I made up a genre. It's called I made up the genre. Made up my own genre. It's called Gothic Adjacent, because I wanted to do what Jane Austen did in Northanger Abbey, where she's making fun of the Gothic genre. So I didn't want to
Okay.
write a Gothic, but I wanted to write, you know, a Gothic with a haunted abbey, except that funny, because I have to, because my voice is funny. I can't do like spooky, scary, stuff.
Yeah.
So, and that comes out of thinking, hey, where is this genre going to go now? I think we may be past the days of just like the ballroom, you know, meet X, meet Y. I
Yeah.
I'm not, the I think we need more plot these days. That's what I'm seeing, is more plot. Things move so fast now when you're watching a series on television.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot more events, like I don't know what you're watching, but we just finished watching, my husband and I just finished watching The White Lotus, and then we just finished The Pit last night. And but they're both great.
Yeah. Love
Loved
the
The
pit.
Pit, loved it. White Lotus was good too. And but they're so fast. You know how fast they are?
Yes. Yeah.
So my next book is faster. So
Okay.
my advice to anyone, doesn't matter whether you're in a so-called dying genre, because again, mine has died like 3 times in my life, or whether you're in, contemporary with a comic cover. The one thing I know is that those comic covers will be dead in like a year.
Hmm.
And you've
Hmm.
got to be rethinking and retooling. You cannot stay where you were. So
Yeah.
it's pertinent to everyone. You've got to constantly be thinking, what do people want now? What do I want is more,
Yeah.
because you don't want to go looking on the net for what other people want. Then you're just behind the 8 ball. You got to be the first one out there.
Yeah.
And you have to take a risk. I mean, maybe no one will want my Gothic adjacent, whatever. I had a lot of fun writing it. So, I loved it. My editor loves it. Hey,
That's a good start. That's a great start. All right. Well, thank you for that. I know that that got a little bit heavy there maybe, but it was something that I wanted to check in with you on because you have been in the historical romance business for a while and can maybe give perspective and maybe calm some fears perhaps with some of the folks who are just getting
just
started.
keep going.
Yeah.
If you really love the genre, just don't tell yourself you're writing the best book in the world. Edit it.
Hmm.
You have to edit. It has to be the very best book you can write.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then they'll find an audience.
Hmm.
The other thing I say is that I think TikTok is actually helpful. Book Talk doesn't have much to do with historical romance, but
Hmm.
I have hired an undergraduate at Fordham at my university who makes some of my TikToks. Others are made by my son. The really sardonic ones are all made by my son. The ones that feature like The Office,
Yeah.
that's his imprint. But I think those actually help. I think it helps sort of humanize historical romance as not just about ballrooms. Like
Yeah.
historical romance has always been witty. Jane Austen was bitterly witty and mean.
Yeah.
She was so mean. So we're not just, right? And I think
Right.
TikTok lets that come out a bit more.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you were talking about tropes a little bit earlier. What are some, two or three tropes that readers can look forward to when they're while reading Hardly a Gentleman?
Well, obviously there is arranged marriage in there, or
Yeah.
forced marriage, or whatever you want to call it. Convenient marriage, I think we call it. There's also He Falls First, because he takes one look at her and he's like, I'm going to marry her. He thinks she's married because she's wearing a wedding ring and she's a housekeeper. And he's like, well, I may have to go get rid of her husband, but because he thinks she's flying away, she's running from an abusive
Yeah.
situation, right? Um, so you have that He Falls First. I think, you also have, it's a trope that I don't see people name so much, but I would call it a humiliation trope, which is that
Mm,
one where she's been humiliated. It's the comeuppance trope.
Yeah.
It's a big one in here. I wanted to to make sure that it was there all the way through. And then one thing that my readers tend to really love is that there is a very eccentric child in the
Yeah.
and a chicken.
Yeah, Wilhelmina.
Wilhelmina. And the little boy who keeps saying, "Are you
Yeah,
serious?" So
I know.
I
Yeah.
live in New York City and I was walking home from dinner. My husband and I had been out and I talked to him endlessly about books and plots when I'm writing them. And he's just kind of like, he's a Dante scholar,
Yeah.
medieval Italian, so whatever. And the little boy said, "Are you serious?" And I was like, okay, I just got his
Going in a
entire
book.
plot around those three words. I mean, his
That's good.
entire character just came in around those three words. And
I
so
love
he
those.
thinks he's got a half rabbit, half chicken, you know? Are you serious? Right? The whole thing just fell together.
Yeah.
So I think
I
it's
love when that happens. I love when just something sparks an idea and then you just get this whole visual image of it's just it's so precious when that happens, you know?
very lucky, right? You know that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what what romance book have you read recently that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, it's not historical romance because again, I can't read historical. But I read Ali Hazelwood's Bride. Have you read that?
No,
Ali
I have
Hazelwood.
not.
Of course, she writes historicals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she writes contemporary novels,
Yeah.
mostly about
Same.
physics professors. So I love those because
Yeah.
the sexism in the academy is alive and well and thriving.
You,
I enjoy that.
you can understand that very
Yes,
closely,
and the
right?
comeuppance
Yes.
in those books is fantastic, But Bride is it's basically a Romeo and Juliet story. He's a werewolf and she's a vampire, and it is really, really
Okay.
beautiful. And
All
it's a
right.
gothic.
Okay.
So I
All right.
learned a lot from reading it. I read it twice, and I think it's just great.
Oh, wow. Well, I love Ali Hazelwood, but I have not read that book yet. So thank you for that recommendation. I always like to put these into the show notes to, just
Yeah,
bring some more awareness to other books, fabulous books that are out there. So that's
great.
great. Before we go, can you give us an idea or a hint about what might be coming up next in exciting projects that you're working on that you can talk about?
Well, the next up is the Last Lady B, my pseudo Gothic
Yeah,
historical romance.
adjacent.
Yeah. Also takes place in Scotland,
Yeah,
um, and it takes place in the Highlands even of Scotland. And so I had a lot of fun with that. And
yeah,
then I'm going to write another one after that, which is also going to be I'm set on Scotland at the moment.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
loving it. I think partly because it does get you away from London society, and I think I'm
yeah,
just not that interested in it right now. Whereas you get up to Scotland, this one's in the Highlands, the next one's going to be in Edinburgh, and you got some really crazy characters, and that's fun. Those are really fun to write. Um,
yeah. And you get to use words like gopping, gopping,
Copy, yes. Some of
gopping.
them. I,
Yeah.
I find, I put a bunch of them in the first draft and I'm editing again. I'm taking them back out. It's like,
I love it.
you
I
know,
love it. It was a great it just helps visualize Kaylin more when
yeah.
he uses words like that. It's great. All right. Well, folks, when this episode airs, Hardly a Gentleman will be out, so be sure to order your copy today. You can check out Eloise's website, which is a beautiful, lovely website. I just adore your websites. There's so much information on there at eloisajames.com. Eloisa, what social media outlets are you most active on? Sounds like TikTok. Is that the one you're most active on, or?
Well, TikTok is where there's a lot of fun videos. And so they do make videos of me and put them up there. But I am actually active on Facebook, especially my Facebook group, which is called Lindale Castle, and on Instagram. And
Okay.
so those are the two that I go to. Um, and then there's also a Facebook page, which I go to less often, honestly, to answer things. But
Okay.
um, you know, I have an assistant who tells me if you leave a message there. But basically, I would love to hear from anyone. There's a link on my website, contact Eloisa. Write me. It takes me a couple weeks to answer, but I would love to hear from anyone. And I do want to explain one thing. Here's the Laird. You'll notice he's not naked.
Yeah, he's got those darn
HarperCollins gave
breeches
him a
on.
pair
Yeah,
of pants. Yes,
yeah,
pair of pants
yeah.
and not very historical pants at
Not
that.
even in the kilt. I know. I
No,
was,
not even
it's
in the
like, give us
kilts.
the
There
kilt.
he is.
Yeah.
He's just cunning in the water.
That's all right. We will forgive them. There's enough of Kaylin there to forgive, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, you betcha. Well, Eloise, thank you so much for joining me. It was
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure, and just as I mentioned before we hit the record button, such an honor to have you on the show. True big fan of yours, and I'm looking forward to your upcoming books for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure to be on here.
thank you. Many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Undercurrents of Romance. You can find more information about the show at tracydevlyn.com/podcast. Undercurrents of Romance is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I'll be back soon with another great romantic read. In the meantime, enjoy the adventure, everyone.